What's your creepiest real life story? Coming home late from a friend's house in a real bad area of Los Angeles. I mean, these streets were gang infested, so I used to walk around with a hammer in my waist because I couldn't get a gun. An old station wagon with all the windows blocked out by aluminum foil pulls up and old man looks at me and uses his hand to beckon me to come in. I showed him the hammer, he just keeps beckoning. I got the creeps and started running and cut through a park and he was already waiting for me. I had to jump a couple of fences to lose him. He looked like freaking weirdo. Scariest crap ever. This happened to my wife during college. She lived on campus, in a more remote mountainous area. One night, maybe 8 or 9, her and a few classmates decide to take a nice peaceful walk up the mountain road past the college. They had been walking for 10 minutes, when suddenly car lights flick on in the darkness at the side of the road and a vehicle comes screeching past them. 2 seconds pass and a half-naked girl comes running out of the darkness shrieking. My wife, terrified, runs the other way back to the college. Luckily the others stayed with the girl and helped her. Seems she had just been abducted and assaulted, and then dropped off in a remote area in the night. When I was 8, I had a friend spending the night one night. It was super late and we were playing Barbies in the living room. I then suddenly got the feeling like we were being watched. I looked to my right and there in the window stood a man. I remember everything about him to this day. He was a white man. I could tell because he was wearing a short-sleeved, dark blue t-shirt that had a little pocket on the chest. His arms were very hairy. He also wore black gloves and a black ski mask. He had his hands cupped on either side of his face, so as to block any glare from the street lights to get a better view of us. I yelped and curled into a ball. My friend saw him and did the same thing. She asked me what were we gonna do. I said, at the count of 3, we're gonna run upstairs and get my dad. I got to 2 and took off. My friend was right behind me. We barged into my dad's room and tell him what we saw. He leapt out of bed and ran outside, but the guy was gone. When I was in like 4th or 5th grade, I lived with my mom and her GF in a 2-bedroom apt. Well, we had strange things sort of happen around the house, but I was young, imaginative. Well, one day we woke up, well rather my mom's GF woke up and soon I was being shaken awake. What the frick did you do to the kitchen? I was like, I stay in my room pretty much all the time. She yanks me out of bed and drags me by my arm to the kitchen. My mom is standing in the doorway of their bedroom right next to mine. I look and see cocoa powder all over the counter, like Nesquik crap. Now, we were pretty freaking poor back then, like, my meal at school was 75% of what I got to eat in a day. I swore up and down I didn't do it, but as I got closer there were little handprints all in the cocoa, smearing and smacking it everywhere, on the cupboards, the fridge. It was on the floor even, with little footprints. My hands were clean, my feet were clean, but I was the only child in the house, and they sure as heck didn't think someone broke in, or heck not even a ghost. I got a pretty good spanking for that. Frick you, ghost. At about 2 AM our neighbor rang our doorbell and was banging on the door. My dad opened the door and she said something about her brother, who was mentally handicapped, murdering her parents and locking her in the closet. He thought she was just having a nightmare, but it turns out she was telling the truth. Cops were called. The guy is in the insane asylum now. Neighbor still lives in that house. I was walking with my older brother one night. We were returning from a game he had. He was probably 9-10 at the time. I was maybe 10. We were approaching the apartment building I live at, and we saw a figure. He was probably the size of an average man. Not surprisingly, the darkness conceals his upper body, including his face. We stopped dead in our tracks. Usually security guards patrol the grounds at this time, but their rounds start at 11. This really shouldn't have scared us, but he started to run toward us. I mean sprint. He was running really fast at us. My older brother screamed at me to run. He chased us for an entire length of a street, until my older brother told me to go under a fence that is arching above the ground. Perfect for our sizes. We were scared shitless as we saw him try to climb over the fence, but luckily we were very close to home. A week later, we found out that a child went missing the night after we escaped. To this day, the child was never found. Alright, This happened a couple of nights ago. I know this is going to sound completely fake, but I swear on my soon to be child that this actually happened. It's around 12:30 and we're hanging out around my town. As a group of college kids, there's not a lot to do at night around where we live, so this is pretty much all we do. Anyway, what seems to be out of nowhere, an extremely drunk man comes stumbling towards us. He asks us, "Can you help me find my house?" This guy is wearing freaking overalls and a trucker hat. And that's it. So, already sketchy. I'm about to say no when one of the girls we're with says, "Yeah, sure, we'll help you find your house." Frick. So now, we have to walk this guy all the way to his freaking house. We begin our walk, and all the way this guy is stumbling along the street, telling us all the kinds of alcohol he has at his house and whether we want to come drink with him. We try to change the topic, so I ask him, "So, what are your plans for tonight?" And his answer scares the crap out of me just thinking about it. He literally, right at our faces, says, "Oh, I'm just gonna kidnap and kill 3 kids." Right. To our freaking faces. So, as you can imagine, at this point I'm really on edge about this drunk overall wearing psycho that we're leading to his house. After about 20 minutes of walking we finally reach his house, and this thing is straight out of a horror movie. It's a pink, Victorian era house. It looks like a murder house if I have ever seen one. Anyway, the guy thanks us and starts asking us if we're sure we don't want to come in and drink with him. But the girl that initially decided we would take him back to his house politely declines, and he starts walking towards her, getting more insistent. So, she turns around and promptly speed walks the frick away. I yell at the guy while he keeps trying to convince us to come in, and we start running away from him back the way we came from. He didn't chase us, luckily, but it's terrifying to think what he was really up to. I honestly believe that he was faking drunk. If we would have been stupid enough and accepted his invitation, I honestly believe something would have happened to us. This guy's was freaking crazy, acting drunk, trying to lure kids into his house with promises of alcohol. Something wasn't right. The following is 100% true. My parents bought a cabin in the Washington Mountain Range, VA. My mother and sister would go there and spend weekends. I remember my mother talking about how they would wake up and the side door of the cabin would be open. They changed the locks, but it continued. What was odd was we never arrived to find the door open. It only opened when someone was staying in the cabin. In summer or winter it didn't matter. I laughed it off thinking they left it open or they didn't close it properly, etc. Being young and adventurous, I decided to spend the night in the cabin during the winter. The cabin was not heated but did have electricity and a small wood stove. So I drove my Jeep out there after work and got to the cabin after dark. I arrived and a light snow had started to fall. I was very cold and I was already regretting going because it was only 13 degrees Fahrenheit. I quickly lit a fire and stoked it to produce as much heat as possible. I closed the door and locked it, pulling it several times to ensure it was closed, not going to open in the middle of the night. I climbed into bed and put an extra quilt on to keep me warm. I quickly fell asleep. I had a nightmare. In the nightmare I dreamed that I woke up and the cabin was ridiculously cold. I walked from the bedroom to relight the fire and I immediately saw the door open and turned 90 degrees to see a tall lizard-like demon with glowing red eyes staring at me. I immediately woke up from the dream and I was, wow, here I am out in the middle of nowhere by myself and I'm having nightmares. Great. I then notice that it's very cold. So I climb out of bed and walk towards the other room to relight the fire. As I enter the room, I turn and in the darkness I can see the door is sitting wide open. Snow had blown in on the floor. The nightmare was coming true. The nightmare was playing out exactly, and the next part was to see a large demon. I let out a yell and fumbled for the light switch like a madman. My mind was racing. The lights came on and there was nothing there. I looked at the snow and didn't see any footprints or evidence of tampering. So in my engineering mind, I assumed the heating of the structure caused some structural shift in the door to pop open. I still didn't go back to the cabin for quite some time. A few years later, a house was built directly across the street. A few months after the new owners moved in, I walked over and introduced myself. We chatted for a little while and I asked how he and the family liked the place. He said they loved the area but it was taking the kids some time to get used to living in the country. He smiled and said, "They're a bit spooked by it all." I asked, "Spooked?" "Yeah, they think a monster comes into their room at night." I must have turned as white as a sheet at that point. I worked as a security guard for a mall. I was stuck with the night shift. The car was broken, so I rode a bike around the outside of the mall. It was about midnight when I heard someone yelling for help and waving his arms towards me. I pedaled like a freaking madman to get over to him. He looked 17 and was poorly dressed for the season. Winter. I ask what's wrong and he tells me, "My friend won't get up, alright, let me call someone." Reach for my phone to call 911. But then the guy grabbed onto me and another man came out of the bushes near us with a gun pointed to my head. Long story short, I got mugged at gunpoint while they handcuffed me with my own handcuffs. When I was around 17-18, I was walking home real late from a friend's house. I was walking along one of the main streets from my hometown when this car pulls up from a really dark residential street. The driver sees me and motions me over and I walk over because I'm a dumbass. He asks me if I know how to get to the next town and I say, yeah, just take this main street all the way down. Once you get over the bridge, you're pretty much there. Oh, I don't know where this bridge is, he says. Hop in, show me. What the frick, I'm thinking to myself. It's at the end of this street. He then asks me if I want to make $20 and I just stare at him. I like to suck dongs, he said with really bugged out eyes as he makes a dong sucking motion with his hands and mouth. I was pretty frozen with shock and just shook my head. He didn't say anything and just sped off down the main street. I took a bunch of shortcuts I knew through the residential areas and pretty much booked it all the way home. I've never ran that fast back home in my life. 13 years old. Hot summer night, so I slept on the pull-out couch under the ceiling fan. Woke up to a man standing at the foot of the bed. I was deliriously asleep and tired, but he was telling me he knew my dad. Start saying creepy crap about my dad that no one would know unless he did. In fact, know my family. Then he started talking about my mom and where she was that night. He was right. At that point, I completely woke up and immediately panicked. I jumped up, turned on the ceiling fan light, it was right above me, and said, "What the frick? WHO are you?" The guy was clearly drunk and confused at that point. He was telling me to be calm, call my dad and he'd know who he was. They were friends from way back, and so on. I ran down the hall to get my brother. He wouldn't wake up at first and thought I was kidding or something. He finally realized I was serious and we went to the living room, but he was gone. Noticed the door was open, so we went outside. He was standing there at the curb. We confronted him. My brother was 19 and huge at the time, and he kept trying to tell us to chill out, call my dad. Everything was fine. We went inside, grabbed a baseball bat and the phone, and went back outside. Dude was gone. My parents have no idea who he was. I was at the Grand Canyon a few weeks ago, camping in a tent with some friends. Around 11 o'clock, I was still awake but everyone else was asleep, and suddenly some women started screaming from what sounded like a few campsites over. They weren't joking around or they were very good actors. They sounded terrified. They screamed for about 10 seconds. At first 2 or 3 of them, then eventually just one. The screaming stopped and I heard someone much closer to our tent start running. Then a car door slammed but the car never started. No one else woke up and I was too scared to move, even to get my phone. I didn't fall asleep until the sun was coming up. Pretty strange story, especially from my current 20-something perspective. When I was 8 or 9, my family took a trip with my dad to Toronto because he was going there for business. He would do this often, take us on trips with him instead of being gone for long periods. We get to this nice hotel. My parents, myself, and my 2 brothers, one 7 and one only 9 months old. The hotel is one of the biggest I'd ever seen at that age. In my opinion, it would be hard to keep running into the same people all day in this complex. The next day, my dad heads off to his appointment, and my mom decides to take us to breakfast. We're at our table in the hotel cafe when this mid-30s early 40s couple approaches us. Otherwise unassuming, but their behavior was strange. They offered to feed my youngest brother for my mom while she ate her breakfast. My mom was a bit overprotective with us when I was young, so I was surprised when she acted so calm, but firm, in telling them no thank you. They insisted twice more before leaving us to it and exiting the cafe. Later on, my mom was taking us to this shopping complex that was underneath connected to the hotel. We saw the couple following us through a part of the mall. My mom made us stop and go into a store until they passed us and left. At this point, my 7-year-old brother and I are looking at each other and thinking that this isn't normal. My mom decides that this might be a weird coincidence. A little later, we decide to head back to the hotel and go swimming. The pool is large, so large that it stretches from indoors to outside. While my brother and I are in the water, my mom has the littlest one with her sitting on a deck chair. Lo and behold, a couple is at the pool as well. They're sitting right across the pool from my mom, just staring at her. She tells us shortly after that we should leave and go back to the hotel room because my dad would be back soon and want to go to dinner. Again, my brother and I are thinking that this is really strange despite how young naive we were. The best part is when my dad finally does return to the hotel room. He knocks and doesn't announce himself. My brother and I run into the bathroom and close the door to hide because we assumed it was that crazy couple. Growing up, my family lived in a 2-family house on the 2nd floor in a Boston suburb. The layout of the house was this: the front of the house was the living room, the middle was the dining room, and the back was the kitchen. Bedrooms followed along each room. My bedroom was next to the kitchen. The kitchen had a door which led to the back stairs. The door had a bolt on it, so one night, I'm sleeping and something wakes me up. I hear the creaking back stairs and slow, light footsteps. I wake up more. Initially I thought I was hearing things, but the sounds are real. They stop, and I hear a light creak. Whoever is out there is trying to push the door open. I heard another creak, this time louder. Then the doorknob is jostled while the door strains some more. More silence. I hear the someone leave and the screen door squeak open and closed again. I was scared shitless. I quietly got out of bed and woke up my mother. She got mad I was waking her up. I told her what had happened and she tries to convince me I was just dreaming. At this point, I'm freaking out and crying because I thought someone was trying to break in when suddenly, bam bam bam, gunshots ring out. I hit the floor. My mom runs for the phone and calls 911. They came from the neighbor's house. The police show up. The neighborhood is lit up with blue spinning lights and the cops are yelling at someone. We stayed far away from the windows on that side of the house. After a little while it was quiet, so my mother went to look out and see what was going on. The police had a guy handcuffed and on the ground. The police entered the neighbor's house only to find the person living there was shot dead. We later learned the guy that was shot was sleeping. When the burglar broke in, he woke the guy up. The guy living there got up to check on the noise and got shot by the burglar. SHHH. Like this video, but quietly so you don't wake up the sleeping papa. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check out another video, or don't. Either way, have a great day you magnificent people.